demon doesn't always come out of the dark. Sometimes that demon is already inside your home, beyond the locked doors, in the deepest reaches of your sleep. Los Angeles in the 1980s was burning. Summer heat, a rising crime rate, and streets steeped in darkness set the stage for a man who roamed in silence. He didn't test doorknobs or scout windows. Every house he fixed his gaze on became a personal temple. Richard Ramirez. He wasn't just a killer. He was a presence that murdered as if performing a ritual, an entity that sanctified the dark. His footprints landed not on soil, but in the deepest alleyways of the human subconscious. He chose no specific victims, drew no profile. Woman or man, elderly or child, it made no difference. He fed not on their physical traits, but on the fear that radiated from them. The real payoff was the look on a person's face at the precise moment terror set in. That pure helplessness. Defining Richard is no easy task because he became less a man than a phenomenon. His eyes resembled those of a rock star who'd struck a deal with the devil. Yet what truly made him dangerous was how visible he was. By day, he vanished into the crowds. By night, he merged with the darkness. And with every attack, the city grew a bit quieter, because people had realized something. Locked doors were not security, only an illusion. In this file, we'll investigate more than a man's crimes. We'll probe the echo of fear in a city's subconscious, the way a nation negotiates its nights. This story is not only about Richard Ramirez, it belongs to everyone who wakes in the night to check whether the door is locked. Every monster was once a child, and every child, a victim of something. Richard was born in 1960 in El Paso, the youngest son of an ordinary working-class Mexican-American family, or so it looked from the outside. Inside the home lay a different world. Silence, suppressed rage, unresolved violence. He suffered epileptic seizures at a young age and grew isolated. But the real break came when he met his so-called role model. His cousin Mike, a Vietnam veteran, was Richard's hero. Mike's mind, however, was filled not with medals but with dark memories. He kept Polaroids in which he posed, smiling beside the corpses of women. Richard, still a boy, saw those photos. In that moment, he lost more than innocence. A bond was forged. It was his first handshake with the dark. One day, Mike shot his wife dead in front of Richard. That act seared the first real violence into the boy's soul, not just a trauma, but an initiation rite. From that day, the shadow inside Richard opened its eyes. Yet this story is more than an individual psychological collapse. Richard Ramirez's reign of terror represents something far beyond demonic darkness. It shows how a society struggles to understand the nature of evil itself. Hannah Arendt spoke of the banality of evil, warning that evil may not look like a devil at all, but grow inside the familiar. Ramirez embodied that paradox. Invisible in the daylight crowd, shape-shifting in the night. Arendt feared people would stop thinking, and Ramirez's crimes flourished exactly in those thoughtless gaps. Leaving a window open, trusting a flimsy lock, labeling a face harmless at a glance, Ramirez became the ghost that pierced every moment we believed we were safe. His violence was forged not only from brutality, but from mental laziness, moral numbness, and collective blindness. He slipped into homes and into our subconscious. Each murder targeted not only a person, but an entire community's faith in its own security. Arendt's words echo again. Evil can become an ordinary extension of the system. Ramirez was a product of a system that normalized violence, sensationalized fear, and watched in silence. Sometimes crime isn't only committed, it's consumed, nurtured by indifference and the attitude of, "It doesn't touch me." The first body surfaced in the summer of 1984. 79-year-old Jenny Vinco was stabbed to death in her apartment. Attacked while she slept, her throat slashed, her body mutilated. Worst of all, the violence wasn't merely physical. That night marked the beginning of Richard Ramirez's dark ritual. Officers at the scene sensed something else inside. This was no burglary, no random rage. It was a message, and the media spread it quickly. There's a killer in Los Angeles. Random. Anyone could be next. Ramirez's goal was no longer just to kill. He wanted to turn fear into a sacred ceremony. Every doorbell, every footstep in the night became his greatest triumph. The attacks followed in quick succession. Similar, yet never identical. Women, elderly couples, children, each approached differently, each bearing different scars. But one thing never changed. Ramirez's face remained unseen, his name unknown. He had become urban legend. Even detectives marveled at the chaotic consistency of his method. Shoe prints, inverted crosses, knife patterns, victim positioning. Everything looked random, yet it was his form of control, ordered chaos. And the media kept feeding him. Newspapers coined a new title: the Night Stalker. He was no longer just a criminal, but a myth, an icon, a nightmare. People trembled in front of their TVs, yet kept watching. Each killing boosted ratings. Hannah Arendt's warning resounded again. Evil is sometimes merely watched. Ramirez was now invading minds as well as homes. His next step? More ruthless, more frenetic, more brazen. Weeks after the first murder, the second victims were found, a couple. He had broken in, raped the woman, beaten the man to death. Ramirez left no trace, or rather, traces the police initially missed. A shoe print, an inverted pentagram, the word Satan carved into the woman's body. Detectives soon realized these incidents weren't random. There was no victim profile, but there was a pattern. Night, quiet houses, an open window or weak lock, a sense that the power had gone out. Pure evil seeping in. Ramirez became a ghost by night, vapor by morning. Rumors grew. Survivors could describe only the eyes. Cold, pitch-black eyes with no reflection of God. The media went wild. Every day another victim, another headline. Night Stalker strikes again. Los Angeles sleepless. Devil's hand walks the city. Cameras lined up outside victims' homes. With every new murder, police pressure mounted. Ramirez watched the chaos and savored it. He wasn't just killing, he was staging a show. He made victims pray not to God, but to Satan. Some victims survived and talked. A slender man with long dark hair, rotten teeth, breath that smelled of decay. Some heard him whisper, Satan. Others saw only a shadow gliding through the darkness. For detectives Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno, this was no longer just a homicide case. It was a war against darkness, and the enemy played by no rules. Ramirez began leaving clues, maybe intentionally, maybe out of arrogance. A car, a fingerprint, a cigarette butt, puzzle pieces scattered. The police closed in on his real identity. Ramirez sensed it and accelerated. He grew more savage, breaking into 2, sometimes 3 homes in a single night, as if trying to empty himself completely before capture. He acted with lust, fury, and the fervor of a self-ordained cult. Meanwhile, commentators kept asking, what kind of person could do this? Is he even human? Number Richard Ramirez was a warning in human form about social blindness, suppressed fears, and media-driven hysteria. As Salerno said in an interview, this guy didn't just break into houses, he broke into people's sense of safety. Now the net tightened. Media, public, and police were locked on one target, yet Ramirez was still free. His next move would turn him from killer into cult figure. Everyone was on edge. Nights in LA felt longer. Doors were double locked. People prayed before sleeping. Neighborhood watch groups formed, gun sales soared. No one knew whose house would be next. Ramirez stayed a step ahead. He wasn't just a physical threat, he was a master of psychological siege. In every home he shattered not only a body but a belief system, leaving marks without hesitation. Inverted crosses on walls, 666 carved into flesh, Hail Satan scrawled in blood on mirrors. These weren't merely blasphemies. Each murder was a rite positioning himself against God. Police now hunted for a motif amid the chaos and found none. Chaos itself was Ramirez's greatest weapon. Then came the first real break. A fingerprint from a crime scene matched an FBI record. At last a name surfaced, The Night Stalker had a face. Los Angeles knew whom it was hunting, Richard Ramirez. The press flashed his photo. Yet Ramirez didn't run. He stayed in the city. His exposed identity inflated his ego, and that ego craved the cameras. Fame. Finally, a neighborhood caught him. Recognized in an East Los Angeles market, he was chased, beaten by locals, and handed to police. An almost ritual public cleansing. Ramirez's blood mixed with the crowd's rage. But this wasn't the end. The real story was just beginning.
Sexually, he looks at me, he thought he was going to establish his own. And I don't know if it was.
Richard Ramirez would carry his show into the courtroom. In court, the chamber became a theater and Ramirez the lead actor. Dressed in black, he showed no remorse, only pride, acceptance, even an invitation. Flashing a Hail Satan sign with cuffed hands, he seemed to wink at the audience. Keep watching. The room was silent except for the cameras. Ramirez was no longer merely a serial killer. He was morphing into an icon. Young women wrote him letters, some proposed marriage. Evil had become not distant and abstract, but close, televised, darkly charismatic. Here Arendt's warning echoes. If people see evil often enough, they learn to live with it. That learning had begun. The media dissected his every move, what he wore, what he muttered. The killer was becoming a character. Justice and truth both warped. Arendt's banality of evil evolved into something else, the commercialization of evil. Hundreds of witnesses testified, murders recounted one by one. Families wept. Ramirez never lowered his head. Sometimes he smiled, sometimes murmured, sometimes simply stared. A gaze devoid of empathy, full of emptiness and spectacle. The public split in two. Some saw him as Satan incarnate. Others still asked, how can anyone be like this? The answer lay not just in legal documents, but in social blindness. Ramirez forced society to face its own darkness. Justice prevailed. Richard Ramirez was sentenced to death, but that didn't end him because the media wouldn't let him die. Each new documentary, interview, or film resurrected him again and again. Evil is not only done, it's told. And as long as it's told, it lingers. If Ramirez is still discussed today, it's not only because of his crimes, but because of the mythology we spun around him. The real question is, what weakness in us made him so iconic? Which silence, which apathy let this nightmare grow? Sometimes the greatest sin is merely to watch. Richard Ramirez spent more than 20 years in San Quentin, sharing each day with the shadows on his cell walls. Some call that justice served. Yet in truth, Ramirez existed elsewhere, inside minds, on screens, in books, a dark icon wandering the collective memory. He died in 2013, age 53, of liver failure. A quiet, arguably too gentle death. And still some asked, what about the next one?
And then we got him with pictures, sunglasses, the same ones that he wore in there.
Because Ramirez's story is as much about society's willingness to shut its eyes as it is about his darkness. Arendt's starkest warning fits here. Evil takes root in the absence of thought. From any thoughtless society, another Ramirez can always emerge, perhaps with a different face or method, but born of the same void, fed by the same silence, walking with the same stare. So this story is not only a look back, but a warning for the future. Every time you avert your eyes from the dark grows. And sometimes, behind an innocent smile, a doorway to hell is waiting. This is not a closing, but a reminder. Evil is never forgotten, it simply reshapes itself in silence. May the victims never be forgotten. We honor their memory with respect. And don't remember, truth lives in silence, but only if we dare to listen. Support the channel, and let's keep asking the questions no one dares to answer.